Hi, I'm Eric,
I'm LDH.
and this is Devblog number 44. We're about 2 weeks into the launch of Syrenthia, and I think a lot of people have kind of had their hands on it now, and they're I guess seeing what the content is and kind of what their goals are with it. And we have Flower Sifter coming out, and he's talking all about the process that was required to make it. But also kind of the ideology into how they made it and how it functioned. Flower Sifter is one of our hardworking developers on this game, and he does a whole bunch of things, but one of the things he focuses very carefully on is the balancing of new content. And so it's really great to see him writing this devblog because it gives us a chance to see kind of the inner workings of his process and how he goes about making choices of what's good to add to the game and the way in which he adds it. So for those of you that are not quite yet playing Walkscape, and you might be seeing this, it's wave 3, which means that if you are to support now, between now and October 6th, you will get same-day access to the game. So if this is something that you want to do, we highly encourage you to do it through Patreon or Buy Me a Coffee. Now, if you're not in a place to support financially for whatever reason, you can apply for free access, and they will slowly be letting people in for free, a limited number of people during this wave 3. Now, how it's going to work is if you get access, you will have access for the entire beta that's continuing until the game launches open. But if you support during this period, you get to enjoy the whole process. Come October 6th, if you support, you will not get access again until the next wave opens.
Next on the devblog is a recap of some of the known issues that people have been experiencing. I know myself, I've had the game crash when I try to open the Wikipedia in-game. But as an alternative, there's a wonderful Wikipedia website that I can link below and an interactive map, which is phenomenal.
So we just really enjoyed a huge content update for this game, and that's something that we got a lot faster than we thought we would. Now what Flower Sifter here is sharing a lot of the behind the scenes stuff that they need to rework. So originally Shampoo, our lead developer, developed his infrastructure to be primarily supported and developed by him. Now, as we know, we have 4 people on staff working on the project now, and there's a lot of collaboration, a lot of sending of files back and forth, and so they need to kind of redo that. And so they are going to be spending a chunk of time now working on their infrastructure to just make the development process more efficient so that they can work together.
Once all of the internal kind of work is accomplished, then they're going to be shifting some focus towards some much anticipated aspects of the game, like travel +1 queuing of activities, which I really am looking forward to, and some gear sets, which we are really going to enjoy seeing more of, and some other improvements, especially with a focus on Syrenthia.
And for anyone who doesn't know, the travel +1 queue is like, imagine right now you're in the game and you want to travel to a location and you want to start an activity. You would have to choose to go, you would have to walk all the way there, and then once you arrive, you'd have to open the game and choose to start the activity. With +1 queue, you can actually say, travel to this location, and once I've arrived there, I want you to start this activity. So that's a highly requested feature that they're going to be adding, and that will be great. What they have laid out here is actually a small roadmap of kind of the developmental stuff they want to do before they're going to be focusing more on content again. So they're going to be working on their internal tooling system. So that's their development and collaborative process they have. They're going to be redoing the pedometer rework because there are still some people that are losing steps at times they shouldn't be. And so they're going to be further adjusting that, and hopefully those people will be well served. They're also going to be doing bigger quality of life features. +1 when you arrive at location is one of those things that's great. But then after that's done, they're going to be adding more stuff to Syrenthia and more content to GDTE. Now, I actually think that's really exciting because there's a whole massive lower region to GDTE. So that's really exciting because that means more content, more activities, new things to do. So we'll have to see what's coming up with that.
Next up, we have job boards, which I'm definitely a fan of, but Flower Sifter is correct here where he says it's a little more difficult for late game players. I have not done well to hoard all of my materials and things along the way, and so selling everything for 2 or 3 coins a piece just to earn the wealth as I could means that my bank isn't as full as it could be to where I could just dump into this job board thing. So, but I love it because of the reputation that it builds towards with factions. So the faction system is that the more jobs you do in a region, you're going to get more of these reputation points that go towards it, which will earn exclusive rewards for that region. And so the job boards are the way that you can, work towards earning more reputation in that region. So I think those rewards are really, really good. And what I love about the rewards in the factions are that they're kind of like do as the locals do. And so the items are really, specific to kind of the culture in the area and the advantages that the locals would know about there. So I'm getting ahead of myself, but all this to say, the job boards are really fun, and I just feel like they're tough to accomplish when I don't have 100 of a specific type of axes to just dump in there. But that is the point of the game, is an item sink that we haven't had yet.
As I've mentioned in previous videos, I haven't been focusing too much on the actual content inside Syrenthia, just because I'm doing a lot of mining and smithing, and I haven't seen too much in Syrenthia that's pulling me away from that. But I wanted to ask you, how challenging do you find the Syrenthia job boards? And that's the first part of the question. The second part of the question is, do you see any rewards on the Syrenthia faction list or whatever it may be that you actually see as very useful, not just in Syrenthia, but game-wide?
Great question. I don't think that the Syrenthia job boards are brutal by any means. I think that they're pretty fair along with the other regions. It's just quantities that's kind of hard to get, but it's not like the jobs expire. I mean, you can pick that job. They're on a rotation to where if you don't choose the job, then it will refresh. But if you choose one and you're like, oh, I'm pretty close to that goal, I can work on it for a few days if I need to. And so I think that they're definitely fair. I mean, they're exclusive to that region, so it's not asking for, not that I've seen, it's not asking for axes or something from elsewhere. Like, they want Syrenthia-based items in the jobs.
That's cool. Okay.
Yeah. And so the rewards, likewise, kind of like I said, do as the locals do. They're going to be Syrenthia specific rewards. I haven't unlocked many of them, and so I don't exactly know all of them, but it's going to boost efficiency while underwater. So much that I've seen, and they're all named things that are specific to the Syrenthia kind of lore. So yeah, it might not be stuff that's useful when you're up on land, perhaps, but I could imagine that they might have additional perks like find material buff or chest finding, and some of these other ones that we enjoy, like global perks, if we're trying to stack all of them as tools to accomplish a specific goal. I wouldn't be surprised if we're going to see some of that, even with some Syrenthia loot.
So I kind of, there's two sides of me. Like, I kind of like that, and I kind of dislike it. I like that all the toys in Syrenthia are kind of geared to be used in Syrenthia, right? Like, they give you stats that are good underwater, for example. I like that because it's like, it makes Syrenthia kind of like this themed sandbox that's really neat. So that's one thing I really like. I also like it because for a player like myself, like, I don't really play for thematics. I play for what I feel is efficient and what I feel is meaningful to me and my goals as a player. And so I'm actually really relieved that I haven't seen any must-have mining or smithing items in Syrenthia, because now I don't have to go and grind something that I'm not particularly interested in thematically to get something that I need to be efficient in mining or smithing, for example. So like, I look at all the tools, and like, once Farganite is released, Farganite, I mean, I know Farganite's out now, but you can't mass grind Farganite tools because there's no way to process mangrove, I think it is, right? There's no way to make mangrove planks. So you can't really grind Farganite right now, hard. But once Farganite is out, once you can get those mangrove planks, then Farganite will have better stats than like the tools from underwater. And so I like that they did it that way, because it's like, if you want to have fun there, you can do that. If you want to feel like, hey, I did that, that's part of my collection, I got that, that's great. But for players like myself, where I'm pushing kind of like leaderboard stuff, and I want to stay competitive, and I don't want to go down a lot of rabbit holes just to get the best gear, I can kind of just put that to the side and say, that's a great part of the game. There are people who are enjoying it. There are people who are having fun with it. But I don't feel like I have to chase it if I don't want to. And I think that's a really neat way of doing it. I think that if, like, let's say, and this might be the case, like, I know there are some faction stores that are locked behind like level 5 faction. Maybe there are some items in that faction store where it's like, once I learn what they are, it's gonna be like, shoot, like I actually need that. And then I'll have to go to Syrenthia and grind things that I'm not particularly interested in. Okay, those are the good sides of it. The bad side of it is that, again, for someone like myself, that's a piece of content that I probably will not play. And so that is a bad thing, because it's kind of like there's a piece of content that I'm not potentially enjoying, even though I'm not like chasing it right now. You know what I mean? But I think overall, I think that's a really smart way to do it. And I'm curious, like if they had other mini realms in the future, like let's say theoretically, if they had a sky realm, I wonder if they do the same thing where like the tools in the sky realm are specific to the fact that you're in the sky and like you're flying or whatever it might be.
Well, here's why I love Syrenthia. I definitely can see their fingerprints on the development for this that's different than Jarbonia, right? Because it was developed with job boards and faction all cohesive in one, right? And so it's all very, very gated, where you have to have enough faction to go to the store or to go visit the kingdom. And then you need certain equipment that you can only get from Syrenthia. Right. You can only get the advanced and expert diving gear to go into the other regions, which I have, and they're very cool. And so it's really, really fun for me, because like I'm somebody who loves like escape rooms. I like to, solve something or like work on something, and then like this door opens up, and like that curiosity of just like what is around the next corner is completely fueling my fire, by all means. But here's what I wonder for you is that even if Syrenthia right now is not something that you might see kind of worth pursuing, think about all the other whirlpools all over all the other water in the rest of the game. I doubt Syrenthia is the only underwater world, right? And so I'm not just saying that, the whirlpool graphic on the map indicates that there's going to be something everywhere, but it's just that there is so much water. And even if like lakes and stuff, if they want to decide to put some kind of underwater ruin or something at every body of water in the game, now they have an underwater like set to do that with, or skill or activity. And so
when you mention the future, it makes me think, because the way they're developing Syrenthia now is you craft the diving sets in order. What about when trading comes out? Like, couldn't I later just get the best diving set off of someone else and skip a bunch of that content if it's tradable?
You could, accept the expert diving equipment requires that you do expert swimming 25 times, which is only found underwater in Syrenthia.
Okay, so I would have to buy the weaker suit to do the 25 actions of expert swimming, so then I could then buy the better suit. Is that correct? Okay, so that's smart designing then. I like that. I'd say that's a good way to do it. Do you feel like the scuba suit, like having to gather the 3 scuba suit pieces, one of them just buying it from a shop, the other one getting it from the Adventurers Guild, the other one dropping from a chest, do you feel like that was like a good way to go about getting entrance into Syrenthia?
I don't think it's a bad way by any means, and I'm so glad that the Adventurers Guild cost was very, very low, and even buying it with coin at the fishing shop was cheap as well. So I mean, it's basically you're quickly 2/3 of the way there. It's really just I walked and walked and walked. I walked longer to get the pants or to get the sunken chest than I did to get the legendary foraging icicle. So
you got lucky, that's why.
Yeah. But that's just my point, is like I just feel more accomplished when I'm working towards an item instead of just like hoping for the random kind of like find. But
so a big part of Syrenthia that came out was consumables. That's the cooking of ingredients to make food, and they have a really neat system where basically it applies itself as you go along, as you do action. So it's really neat. Some of the consumables are also coming from chests, some of them that we've talked about in previous episodes. But I would say kind of what's covered here is, I would say, a little bit of a controversy in the Westgate community. A lot of people have basically been saying the consumables that we make aren't that great. They're not that useful. They're not that powerful. And Flower Sifter here is attempting to address that. And he has a rationale here that I think would be good for us to look at. So the first point that Flower Sifter is making to explain why the player-made consumables are not as powerful as they might be is he says players are getting the full experience rate from cooking fish and dishes and the benefit from other skills from using the consumable. He says if the benefit for the other skill approaches the steps you took to make the dish, cooking becomes a free skill and consumables would be worth near nothing. Basically what he's saying is if I do 1,000 steps in cooking to make a dish, fishing plus cooking, if it takes 1,000 steps to make a dish, but that end product saves me more than 1,000 steps in another skill, or even close to 1,000 steps in another skill, then what he's saying is that he thinks that cooking is too powerful. And basically, the time you spend investing into cooking is not a sacrifice, and therefore it's a free skill.
That's a really interesting point. Do you agree with that?
I have to say I do not, and I'll explain my reasoning behind it. Okay, so I've played quite a few RuneScape idle games, and I know every game is different, and I know all games are developed differently with different mentalities. The truth of the matter is, in my other idle RuneScape game that I played, cooking really sucked for a really long time. And no one really did it. And the reason why no one really did it is because it wasn't worth the time. Now, people that were going for completion, who are going for high skill levels, they did it still because they needed the skill level total that they got from it. But as far as like people like investing into it as a moneymaker, because there was trading in that game. So as far as people investing into it as a moneymaker, there was no supply and demand. And so people didn't do it. It didn't grease the economy. People didn't go in their, they had Iron Man versions of the game in that game. So people didn't go on their own time to make it because it just wasn't really that efficient. It didn't really get you much or do much for you. Then they reworked it. They just redid the skill completely, like from the ground up. And they redid it so that the buffs that it gave you were a lot more meaningful, and you basically wanted those buffs. And so at that point, the skill became meaningful. People bought the resources on the market. People focused on the skill and specialized in the skill, and people got really high levels so they could produce high quality food, which was really good. I get what he's saying here about saying, if we make cooking, the outcome of cooking so powerful that, let's say I do 1,000 steps in cooking and fishing and I get a major efficiency bonus for something else that's worth more than those 1,000 steps. It's like, well, all that time that I did in cooking was rewarded so strongly. It's like I did cooking for free. But isn't that kind of what you want, to be honest? Like, don't you want
I think so.
a skill to be so useful that you want to do it? That's the whole point of having a skill, right?
It would, it's like people would learn the lesson the hard way if they only focus on mining or even combat, right? And they don't ever pursue consumables, and then somebody surpasses them and they're like, well, I'm working really hard on this. How are you advancing? And they're like, well, I'm also pretty high level at cooking. And so it definitely makes sense. It adds some balance into all the other skills.
Yeah, and like, let's say you have someone who's on the leaderboards or they're pushing a skill really hard. Wouldn't it be really cool for them to really want that food and for it to have a major impact on what they're doing? I'm not talking like crazy things. Like, don't double the experience. Don't give me like a crazy efficiency bonus. But like, make it desirable, right? And I think the way it is now, the self-made food, except for a few exceptions, like I think the crafting outcome stuff is good, carrot soup, and I think some of the other stuff is good. But most of the player-made food that I've seen, from my perspective, has been pretty underwhelming. And I think that's what Flower Sifter is addressing here. A lot of people are saying, but consumables aren't that great. I mean, except for the stuff that comes from boxes, but that's not made by a skill. And the next point, he says, if the experience rates were lower, hardly anyone would engage in the cooking system in the future single-player only version of the game. And I would say this is another point where I kind of took a double take. So for anyone that doesn't know, Walkscape is planning to release kind of like a single player version of the game that is not online, that is solely on your phone. So if you're a person that doesn't want to pay for membership in the future, you can buy this offline version. There's lots of good things about that. But let's be honest, that's going to be a very sub version of the actual community. Most of the community will play it online It is an MMO. And so I think that you have a bit of a challenge when you're building a skill that's meant to be an MMO, where we know there's going to be trading, we know there's going to be all these sorts of social things that affect the implications of cooking and food. But then you're like, but we're not going to make it like this because there's going to be an offline version. I feel like you're kind of like, that's a problem. That's my opinion. Because it's like, You're right, an Iron Man offline single player version would do cooking and food differently than a multiplayer game. So I think that you can't really have your cake and eat it too in those areas.
I think you raise really valid points. I just wonder, in these other games that you're referencing and with the tweaks they've made and stuff, how do they then balance it to where if I'm the best combatant or something in the game and I earn a lot of money by doing it, and I take that lot of money and I pour it into trading to where I can get a lot of consumables, which will buff my ability even more. And it would kind of snowball effect, right? And so how do they balance it to where there's not that runaway train where it's like the better you get, the better you're going to get?
Well, I think you think very carefully about the percentages of your consumables, right? Like, for example, they've identified the chest consumables as extremely powerful and potentially too powerful. And we see certain buffs there. For example, there's a smithing food that gives you 25% double, I think it's double reward. Okay. I think that is, in my opinion, and I think there's lots of people who disagree with me, probably potentially Flower Sifter. I think that would be an excellent amount of bonus for a high-tiered player-made buff, right? And I think that comes in alignment with the carrot dish there that gives you 25 crafting outcome. That's the same amount of crafting outcome that you find on the best cape in the game with the crafting outcome, which is the Cape of the Trailblazer. So if you're going to give us food that can produce that much crafting outcome, I don't think it's completely unreasonable to think that food could also make you 25% more efficient at a skill. I don't think that's unreasonable. I will pay a good chunk of money for some well-crafted food. Again, in this other RuneScape game that I was playing, it's idle based, so similar in the way they do the game making. There, I was a miner, and there were a couple foods actually that were really good that made me quite a bit more efficient at mining. And it wasn't an arm and a leg to buy it off the market, but I would have been foolish not to use it. But it did create a market for cooks, and it was really good that way. So as far as like, will it snowball a combatant and make them better and better? I don't think so. Not if you're choosing reasonable percentages, like 25, 10, 15% at something. Maybe it's double action. Maybe for a combatant, it's some other skill or that kind of thing. That's my thought.
I just want a completely innocuous, like, chest drop consumable to randomize players' cosmetics and force you to have to go back to the wardrobe and change your character back. And that'll be a hilarious prank. You just
like you like take a bite of like poisonous squid and
yeah.
I don't know.
And now you've got like purple hair and like a mustache and that would be hilarious.
Oh my gosh.
The reason it's hilarious too is because like on the social feature you can see people's like profile, like their avatar, and so you'll be like, you ate that rotten squid, didn't you?
Whereas I look at it from the perspective of, what if there's someone who only wants to cook, and that's who they want to be, and that's what they want their identity in the game to be. Yeah, you can't be a cook. You can't be a cook in this game if no one's going to buy your stuff.
Exactly.
You would have to be a fisher cook, and then you'd have a bunch of useless products in the end. So like, you have to actually make the product desirable. Maybe the solution isn't to nerf the use of it. Maybe the solution is to make it so you don't get as many steps out of it as they do. That way people have to work longer and harder to get the goods, but then people will actually want those goods in the end. That way it doesn't feel like a free skill, because you had to do so many steps to get so many steps worth of consumables.
For sure. And then that would double down on like the respect it would bring for like, oh man, you specialize in cooking, like you walk a lot, you go far. Like,
in one of the other idle games I play, there's one guy who's like the best cook in the game, and it's really cool that he can make really nice stuff. So I really like this kind of devlog. I like devlogs that deal with details. And I also like devlogs that deal with feedback that players have given. I like that Flower Sifter has laid out players' concerns, and I like that he's addressing them. And, you know, when you got a game like this where you're building it from scratch and you're adding things and people are playing it and giving you their feedback, there's the temptation to not communicate and to just move forward with ideas and all that kind of things. And I like that Flower Sifter is not just hearing the feedback, but he's engaging in that conversation. And so I like a devlog like this where I can say, you know what, I think that it could be better. Or I think that there might be some other way of doing it. And so thanks for doing that, Flower Sifter. Thanks for your transparency. And we look forward to this kind of discourse, because honestly, like, kind of grinding through things and thinking through the pros and cons, that's something a lot of gamers love. And so
Yeah.
I appreciate the opportunity for this devlog to kind of wrestle with things a little bit.
Yeah, this community in particular, I think, is a lot of deep thinkers, right? I see the Discord just full of
true.
people who are studying the game, studying the wiki, and building out their efficiency paths and developing a meta as they go. And so it is really, really great that they can have these transparent things, and just to kind of include all of us in the behind the scenes as far as the development process.
So thank you, Flower Sifter, for this devlog. Thank you for the team that has worked so hard to get all this stuff out. You know, wherever we land on developments and changes, I've only seen great things. I know there's a lot more great things to come. Thank you guys for busting your butts so hard to get this ready for Gamescom. And there are so many people that are excited about it. I've got a couple of real world friends playing now, and they're just in love with the game. So it's fun for me to watch them discover it through their eyes, and see them play it. We always end off these devlogs with thanking you guys, because I love this game and I love the community, and we appreciate you.